Welcome to Financial Issues, where we join reality with truth, helping you make the most of your money by honoring God with your investments. Now listen in as we give you the practical tools and advice you need to become a biblically responsible investor.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Financial Issues. Today, I'm Seth here with you this morning. Hey, thanks for joining us today, folks. We're live. It is Tuesday. What is today? July 9th. July 9th, Tuesday, 2024. So great to be here with you today, folks. Phone lines are open if you want to join the conversation. 610-363-1110. We have a lot of news headlines to get to. We'll get to some partner questions later in the show as well, God willing. But right off the bat, I would ask you all, please keep Shanna in prayer. She is pretty close to that storm right now, the hurricane that's down in East Texas right now. I'd urge you to pray for her as well as all of the Financial Issues family in that area. I know we have quite a few people who listen to the show. I saw one of you on the chat this morning. Thankfully, Shanna is doing well. Her family's doing well. Everybody's safe, but they have no power. So you can pray for them. And I would urge you to pray for everyone in that region right now. I believe the last I heard was, I think the death toll was probably 6 people at this point. So it's just horrible whenever anything like that happens. And pray that God's hand of protection would be over, especially the believers in the path of that storm right now. So Shanna is doing well, and God willing, she'll be back on the program tomorrow. But we'll be live today. We'll keep things moving as best as we can. So I hope you'll join us. Again, phone lines are wide open. And by the way, if you're listening or watching on a pre-recorded version of the show, obviously you can't call in when you listen during that pre-record, but you can if you catch the live show. So we air live every day from 9 to 10 a.m. Eastern Time. So 610-363-1110 is the number to call in. Again, 610-363-1110. Lastly, I'll just let you know we did have a sell alert issued yesterday, so make sure that you check that out and act on it, please. 2 stocks that we're asking you to sell. So check that alerts page on the website. We also sent an email out to all of our partners as well. Let's take a look at the markets here, folks, as we open the show this morning. The markets opened yesterday, first day of the week, in relative positive territory as they kind of awaited some more inflation data and the official kickoff of earnings season for quarter 2, which again really doesn't kick off as much until later this week, particularly on Friday when we get some big banks that will be reporting earnings, including J.P. Chase. By the end of the day yesterday, Dow Jones was slightly under the flat line. The S&P 500 was a bit over the flat line at 0.1%. Hit a new record high, by the way, as did the NASDAQ, which finished up above 0.25%. And for the S&P 500, if I said 10%, I apologize. That was 0.1%. But both the S&P and the NASDAQ hit new record highs yesterday on a relatively muted day as we started the week. The pre-markets were on the rise early this morning. Right now, a little bit muted. The S&P and the NASDAQ a little higher than the Dow Jones, which is hanging right around the flat line. The markets will be waiting for when we get off the air today. Jerome Powell will testify in his semi-annual hearing before Congress. The markets will also be waiting for some inflation data later on this week, as well as those earnings reports. But let's get to that testimony here, folks. So the markets kind of seem to be indicating, as they have been recently, not as much this past year, but recently it seems, we've said time and again on the show, that there could be a rate cut for September. Now, there could be. The markets seem to be leaning that way. The Fed has every incentive to cut rates on the eve of the 2024 election and give an appearance of strength before the American people decide which direction they will go, assuming that the elections are fair and reasonable. Now, Thursday's inflation data might give a little more clarity on this as well, whether the Fed will slash rates or not, but that seems to be the big question. Will the Fed cut rates in 2024? And if so, will it happen before the election? All this is happening, folks, while the Federal Reserve is trying its best to maintain at least a public sense of neutrality, a public image of neutrality. And the Fed actually did this earlier last week. It was, I saw a headline, the Federal Reserve is highlighting its political independence, it calls it, as the presidential campaign is heating up. So the Fed Reserve stressed the importance of operating independently of political pressures in its July 2024 monetary policy report released late last week. This report said in part, quote, there is broad support for the principles underlying independent monetary policy. Those are the Fed's words. That economic research has shown that the economy does better under these principles. Now, it's very interesting coming out from the Fed here because We've said this before. We believe there really is no true apolitical person or apolitical institution, meaning there is no non-political institution, because politics, as we've said before, folks, is based heavily upon what you believe to be right. And so none of us is truly apolitical, and I think that is true for the Federal Reserve as well. The Federal Reserve is keeping a very close eye on what is happening, especially what has happened in light of the recent news, as we saw several weeks ago, from the debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, which, as you all know, went very, very poorly for the current president, Joe Biden. So the Fed is keeping an eye on this, folks, but they are trying to maintain this image of political neutrality, if I suppose you could call it. Speaking of the Federal Reserve, the June meeting minutes were released last week. The June 11th and 12th meeting, where the Fed did hold the lines. They did not move interest rates one way or the other. The policymakers noted that progress in, quote, reducing inflation had been slower this year than they'd expected last December. Now, they concluded that it was not appropriate to cut rates until more data confirmed that inflation is moving sustainably toward that 2% target rate. The same language we've been hearing for probably more than a year now, honestly. There was one more quote here. Some participants emphasized the committee's data-dependent approach, with monetary policy decisions being conditional on the evolution of the economy rather than being on a preset path. So it'll be very interesting to see what the Fed does here, folks. We'll keep an eye on it as well. Again, all of this is pointing to one of the most important, if not the most important, election in our country's history coming up in November of 2024. Hey, I did want to remind you as well, as we're opening the show here, we have a letter of support out right now for Tractor Supply. I mentioned this on the show yesterday. I will drop that link in the chat, and we'll make sure to get it on social as well. You know, we want to use the megaphone of FISM for good, folks, and so oftentimes we will put out these petitions to all of you, our listeners, so that you can let your voice be heard, really in a righteous anger kind of sense, when companies stray off the right path. But in this instance, Tractor Supply has done a very good thing. They were teetering on the edge of getting into the woke stuff, and then they turned course. They essentially apologized and said, we're not going to do this. We're going to focus on being a good company and serving our customers and our investors, and we want to support them and praise them for that. So we have a petition out right now. Please sign this letter of encouragement for Tractor Supply today. Go to financialissues.org, scroll down, click sign our petition. I'll make sure to put that link in the chat as well. Okay, right now, folks, we got some wisdom from Dan Celia, the benefits of rebalancing. Here is our founder, Dan Celia, talking about one of these very important aspects of investing well.
When we are reallocating, when I went to 60 in cash and then 40 in defensive strategies, and they ask you to rebalance accounts, should we always do that, and what's the benefit of that?
Rebalancing is probably one of the biggest overlooked strategies that the average investor doesn't do. And yes, it's a very good strategy. And the reason it's a good strategy, and I've been guilty of this myself in my IRA account, which I tend to ignore. I worry more about everybody else's stuff than I do mine. I tend to forget, and I don't rebalance on a quarterly basis, at least, like I'd like to. And here's the idea of rebalancing. Number one is, if you believe in your strategy, you've got a good strategy going here, you say, listen, I've got 10% in, you were talking about Timothy, I have 10% in the Israel fund. I have 20% in the defensive strategies fund. I have, 30% in whatever other fund. You've got these things. You believe in that kind of allocation. What happens is the 10% in the Israel fund might go up 10% in a quarter or 5% or whatever it goes up. Now you're over your 10% allocation. So you need to reallocate that back to 10%. And the beauty of reallocation and rebalancing is that it allows you two things. One, to take profit. You kind of do it automatically when things go up. And secondly, to buy in cheap when things go down. Because if the Israel fund is a 10% strategy and it goes down and you're now down to 8%, you put money in when it's low, below your cost basis, to get back to the 10%, and you're buying in cheap. And all of that is a strategy that helps you in the long run maintain a profitable account, and if something goes down, helps you to recover in what goes down quicker. So it is a very good strategy. I think that, and the beauty of Timothy with that is you can have that allocation being done in a very regular basis. I'm not sure what it is, but it's at least quarterly. And I think that's a real good strategy. So yes, and that's why it is done, and everybody should engage in that.
Hope that was encouraging for you, folks. We got more financial issues coming up here. We'll hear more wisdom from Dan Celia. Hey, keep in mind, folks, we do have some new additions to the buy list as well, so check those out whenever you have the chance at financialissues.org. We'll be right back after this break. Stick with us.
So I was just getting on my feet, and I met someone, and I got pregnant, and I wasn't ready. How am I going to raise a baby? And I barely can take care of my daughter and myself right now. I Googled abortions, and I scheduled an appointment thinking it was an abortion clinic. When I was at the clinic, after they told me how far along I was and that the baby had a heartbeat, I cried. And it gave me a minute by myself in the room. I broke down and I prayed to God. I asked the Lord to, when I walk out of those doors, to just give me the strength to be able to go through the pregnancy. Made my decision at that time. I'm super grateful that I'm able to go down this journey with my daughter, and I'm just super glad that I didn't have an abortion. I've learned how to trust God. It feels amazing.
There are moments in life that define us. Choices determine the courses we take. Choices that create life, or those that save a life. And some make life worthwhile. There are decisions to stay or to go, to remain the same or to grow. Sometimes we pray and make peace. Other times we take a stand for what we believe. In celebration, mourning, triumph, and defeat, we are invested in every decision we seek. Despite differences, we have one thing in common, the desire to do all for the glory of God. Keep your wallet aligned with your heart and your investments in harmony with your faith. Timothy Plan, biblically responsible mutual funds, ETFs, and retirement plans. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing.
Welcome back to Financial Issues, folks. We are here live today. Just a reminder that Shanna is safe and sound, but she's not live with us today as she is very close to that storm down in Texas. So please pray for her family, for her safety, as well as all of the FISM family and all the believers down in the path of that storm. I believe I saw that the storm is supposed to go up the past that coast of East Texas into Arkansas, perhaps up into the central United States later on this week. So pray for protection for the believers there, especially so. All right, let's get to some more wisdom here from Dan Celia. Started off here. By the way, folks, if you're new to our program, if you're watching on NRB or listening on CSN, Dan Celia was one of the great financial minds of the 20th and 21st century, and so we want to try to keep his voice on this program as much as we can, of course, and so we're doing that right now. This clip, Dan talks about the wisdom in getting out of debt. A very good place to start. Here's our founder, Dan Celia.
You should always be working to get out of debt, and then you got to work to stay out of debt. Once you get out of debt, it's not over, the work, that is. The way you stay out of debt once you get out of debt is you got to have a good savings account. You got to have a way to pay for things that are going to happen. Not could happen, they're going to happen. One of the best protections you can have is to keep the wolves away from the door. The second thing is that we have got to be prudent and wise with our investment strategies. You have got to think about the fact that it is going to go down. I would tell you that, hey, don't worry about it. It's okay. It's down. It's no big deal. That's the way markets work. They go up, they go down, but your ups are going to outweigh your downs. You just got to hang in there. The question is, do you have time to hang in there? In other words, are you going to need it in 3 years and it's going to take 3.5 years before it recovers? Are you going to need it in a year and it's going to take 1.5 years to recover? Will you be able to handle the recovery? In other words, wait it out. And the only way you can do that is if you have cash as a part of that portfolio. If you have a percentage of money in your money market account or in CDs, that even when the rest of it is going down, this part is not going down. If you don't have that, if you can't create that, then you need to reconsider whether you should be invested.
Next one here we have, folks. So let's harken back to a couple weeks ago. Shanna talked about the dangers of this concept known as day trading. Dan had a few things to say about this too, and we loved those old Dan rants, and he shares some really good timeless wisdom here. He doesn't go quite as hard into the rant because he's talking to a caller, and so he's being gracious as well. But here's Dan's thoughts on this concept of day trading.
I have a question about day trading, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it and see if you recommend any of it. My husband and I are fixing to make some money off of a property that we've sold, and we've heard that that may be a good way to invest in like a side hustle kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, it's not really investing. It's just what you said. It's day trading. You're not leaving any money. It's not an investment, so to speak. I mean, I'm 100% against it. I know too many of the horror stories to ever be for it. You hear all the good stories because they're like, they're gamblers. They never lose. They only win. And you hear the good stories, but I know too many of the horror stories to ever think it's a good thing. So, I can't. I can't. I would submit to you that the vast majority of people that are day trading have no idea what they're trading or why they're trading it. They don't understand how it fits into the grand scheme of anything, whether it be the economy or the market on that day. So it's very, very difficult. If you have an enormous amount of money, you can make some money. I know a guy that makes a very good living. He came off of Wall Street. He was a trader on Wall Street for 22 years. He came into an enormous amount of money, and he makes a lot of money, and he sits home, and he's been day trading for about 15 years. But it is, it's a very difficult thing to do. You will have a really good trade, you'll make a lot of money, and you'll have another good trade, and you'll make a lot of money, and you'll have another good trade, and you'll make some money, and you will start to think that you're really good, and this is really a great thing. And that's when the big losses hit. And because you're trading things that are very volatile, very small, some things that are very small, the downturns don't generally come up very quickly. You can't hold on to them. You're forced to sell them. You're forced to sell them because you've got to get money for the next trade. When you sell them, you've just solidified your loss. That's money you can never, ever, ever get back again from that particular stock. Now, if you take the losses, say, I'm not trading, I'm going to sit on it for the next 20 years, yeah, you probably get it back in, 4 or 5 times. But that's not what you're there to do. You're there to day trade. So everything has to be traded. So the good gets traded with the bad. So you got to be extremely well diversified, and you got to hope you have days where you have more good than you have bad. It's not always going to be like that. I would say under normal market conditions, there is a good chance that you will have more good than bad if you're trading 30 to 40 stocks every day. But it's really a difficult thing, and I can never recommend it. You've never heard me talk about it because I'm always afraid that if I talk about it, people think that I'm recommending it because they have selective hearing. So all I can say is I wish you the best if you're going to do it, and just be as vigilant as you possibly can,
And maybe you'll be one of those people that success with it, I hope.
Final piece of wisdom from Dan Celia here, our founder, of course, is on tithing, actually. Now, this is a very interesting question here he gets from a low-income listener who does not have a lot of money but still wants to tithe. Great wisdom from our founder, Dan Celia. One more time, here is our founder, Dan Celia.
Hey, Mary Beth.
Hi. I have a question. I am disabled and very low income. I get $711 a month for my income, and I pay my tithe of $72. Gladly, love to. Wish I could give more to support things, but I really struggle to pay my basic bills. I don't have any extras. I don't have cable television. I don't have internet access. Don't have long distance on my phone. Don't go out and buy records or books and things like that. But I also received food stamps, and I had not ever thought about it before, but someone had said something to me about something, and I kind of started thinking, well, should I be like tithing my food stamps? And at first I was thinking like, well, that would I, like for a tenth of my food stamps buy food and give it to a food pantry? But then I thought about it, and I thought, well, that's probably not legal. But so then for my food stamps, should I, like, for, 10% of my food stamp income, should I be, trying to take that from?
Yeah, that's a good question, Mary Beth. Here's what all I can say is obviously, you're using the system that is in your case is a great thing. That's what the system's there for, a safety net and for help in that regard. But I do believe, and I appreciate the fact that you do tithe on your disability check, and that because all the things that we receive, obviously are a gift from God. We live in a nation that God's hand of blessing has been on for 238 years or so, and I believe that is a gift. And yeah, I think probably from if we wanted to be very legalistic about your tithe, then, I guess the value of those food stamps, whatever that value is, that extra, $15 or $10 or whatever it is you receive, I think it would be wonderful if you can find a way to, give glory to God for that benefit. So, but at the same time, I loved what you said at the beginning of the question, is that, you wish that, your heart's desire is to tithe more. And I do believe that we are to give as our heart would lead. And I think God, obviously God knows our heart. He knows what you would like to do. God does want us to provide for those under our roof, in this case, you. And, you've got to, obviously see some sort of practicality to that. But I will say this, if you tithe on that money, on that food stamp money, I believe, because God is the great multiplier, I don't believe that you'll notice it. I don't believe that it will be something that will cause you strain and heartache by tithing on it. So I certainly think that it is the right thing to do, and if at all possible, I think you ought to do it. It is a gift from the Lord, so I think you ought to do that. And here's the thing, Mary Beth, and you already know this because you've experienced this. In my opinion, tithing is one of the greatest acts of worship that we can do and engage in, because I think that we all hang so tightly and have such necessity for the dollars that God's blessed us with. And I think the giving up of even just a little bit, even of 10% of it, really is such a great commitment and such a wonderful act of worship. And so, one of the ways that I would look at it is don't deny yourself a greater act of worship, even to the Lord, than you already are doing. So that's another wonderful way of looking at it, and I hope you'll do that. But I thank you for that call, Mary Beth, because I'm sure it is going to be an encouragement to others, and I appreciate you ministering to others in that way by asking that question.
Folks, at some point we'll do a bit of a deeper dive into tithing, perhaps later this month. But I hope you enjoyed that wisdom there from our founder, Dan Celia. It's always good to hear from him. Folks, if you have to leave us, if you watch the shorter version of the show, if you listen to a shorter version, we have to bid you farewell for now. Hopefully it's just for this segment because you found the live show. For the rest of you, we got more financial issues coming up right after this. We'll take a look at a few more headlines, get to some partner questions as well. And your questions, phone lines are wide open, folks. 610-363-1110. We'll be right back after this break.
Hi, this is Sheena Bird, the host of Financial Issues. The Financial Issues family is so blessed to have saved tens of thousands of babies, all thanks to the generous support of you, our listeners and viewers. For $140, you can sponsor 5 ultrasounds. Please go to preborn.org, that's preborn.org, or financialissues.org and click on the Preborn logo. Save a baby, save a life.
Every time I turn on the news, I get so frustrated. When I read a headline, it's obvious they're just trying to manipulate me for clicks and views. I just want to stay informed about what's going on without all the drama and opinions. I knew I needed to find an alternative, and thankfully I found FISM News. They keep the viewers up to date with all the latest news without the extra noise. Check them out by going to fismnews.tv. That's fismnews.tv.
Are you new to biblically responsible investing? As Christians, we have the responsibility to be good stewards of the money God has entrusted us with. As we invest in the market, we want to make sure that the companies we invest in aren't taking money and using it to fund industries that grieve the heart of God, like pornography, abortion, gambling, or the LGBT agenda. That doesn't mean a company must be a Christian company to be biblically responsible. It means that company is solely focused on excellence in its industry and doesn't support things that God hates. To learn more about biblically responsible investing and how you can put it to practice in your portfolio, go to financialissues.org.
The mission of Financial Issues is to expose Jesus for all he is, all he means, and all that he can do.
Where's Mima? We found out Shepard's diagnosis when I was about 17 weeks pregnant. We learned that he was going to need a series of surgeries after he was born in order to give him what they considered a normal life. And we weren't sure how this worked.
Yeah, very emotional, very, very broken. And as my wife just said, not sure how this worked. And called Samaritan, and they said, you just go have that baby. You leave the rest to us.
And just to hear the confidence on the other end of the phone of this is not something that you need to be concerned about at all. You focus on the health of your family, the health of your baby, and we will walk with you every step of the way.
Securities offered through G.A. Reppel & Company, a registered broker-dealer and investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. Opinions expressed by Shanna are hers alone and are for informational purposes only and do not necessarily represent those of G.A. Reppel or the outlet on which you are listening. You should consider how the information applies to your situation prior to personally implementing it and consult any financial professional you work with to make sure it's applicable to your financial plan.
Folks, today's show brought to you in part by our friends at Timothy Plan, pioneers of biblically responsible investing. We love Timothy Plan, and you got to check them out if you're looking for a retirement plan, mutual funds, ETFs, all that sort of thing. Check them out, timothyplan.com, timothyplan.com, or you can call them at 800-846-7526. Markets just opened. So let's see here what they're looking like. Similar to what they were predicting in the pre-markets, the Dow Jones is down about 0.1%. The S&P 500 is rising on the heels of that fresh record, so continuing to rise into record territory, up 0.25%. And the NASDAQ, same thing, up almost 0.5% right now. Oil is $82 a barrel, almost on the nose, and the U.S. 10-year Treasury up a little bit from where it was yesterday, but still right around that 4.29%, almost to 4.3% is the 10-year Treasury yields. So, folks, I dropped a question for you in the chat there that I would love to just speak on for a moment here briefly. I said I'd love to hear all your reactions to the GOP statement yesterday. So the Republican Party issued its 2024 statement. It included various talking points. Included on that was abortion as well as gay marriage. Very, very interesting here. But to kind of tee that up, let me give you just a headline here. This is one thing we didn't talk about from the debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, is what each candidate said about abortion during that debate. And so former President Trump said that the Supreme Court got it right when it overturned Roe v. Wade. I think we would all agree with Donald Trump that the Supreme Court got it right. He said, quote, "We brought it back to the states, and the country is now getting back together." Biden, meanwhile, pledged to restore Roe if he's reelected, after which Trump correctly pointed out that this means that the president supports abortions up to birth, since Roe sanctioned abortions through the third trimester of pregnancy. Now, Biden refuted this claim, said his presidential rival did a terrible thing by appointing the conservative justice to the Supreme Court, who ultimately overturned the federal abortion rights. Trump also said that he would not block the availability of abortion pills, saying he agreed with the Supreme Court's recent ruling to strike down a ban on mifepristone. Folks, there's a lot that we could say about this, but I brought up the thing about what the GOP said yesterday because really the GOP is Trump's stand on abortion. So the picture here we have from the debate is we have one man who is relatively in the middle of the road of the rhetoric, historically pro-life in action, definitely, by promoting those Supreme Court justices who overturned Roe v. Wade. That's a very pro-life thing. We have another candidate who is the figurehead, at least, of the most pro-abortion regime in American history, and who does support abortion up until the moment of birth. The truth is, and I'm going to go out on a limb saying this, but I believe it's true, that neither of these two candidates is correct in their assessment. The fact is, abortion is the murder of babies. Okay, it's taking a human life. It's murdering a child. That's like one of the most heinous things you can do. You kill a child intentionally. Do you realize how bad that is? And we know that before God, all sin is equally deserving of death, but we also know that different sins bear different consequences, and that sin is pretty heavy. And so the reason I brought this up, folks, is because I was very frustrated yesterday to see what the GOP said about abortion. The platform says that Republicans will oppose late-term abortion while supporting mothers and policies that advance prenatal care, access to birth control, and IVF. That language is very soft, and in my opinion, I believe it's too soft. What we're seeing here is we are seeing the modern-day GOP essentially morphing into what was the 1990s version of the Democrats, which was pro-choice. Basically, the modern Republicans are pro-choice, the modern Democrats are pro-abortion. The pro-choice stance, we cannot settle for that. Cannot settle for that at all. And so I bring this up, folks, to remind you that as Christians, first of all, we can't engage in Christless conservatism. It's useless. Okay, upholding conservative values without Christianity is one of the most foolish things you can do. And I think this is one of the results of it, because Christianity is fundamentally pro-life. And so as Christians, we now understand that there's maybe some separation within conservatism. Christians have to lead the charge to defend the lives of babies no matter what it costs us, even if it costs us votes, even if it costs us political power. And that's why we partner with ministries like Preborn, of course. Preborn is on the front lines. Folks, I'm not saying that it doesn't mean that, you have to play the long game in politics. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm seeing is there's a trend moving leftward, where once the Democrats were the pro-choice people, now modern Republicans are the pro-choice people. And it has to stop. Has to stop. It takes money to do all of this, folks. It takes money to operate Planned Parenthood, and it takes money to support Preborn. And so that is why we ask you to support ministries like Preborn. You can dial pound 250 today and say the keyword baby, and that'll take you right to where they are on the front lines. Preborn understands they are not okay with just protecting babies in the second or third trimester. From the moment of conception, that baby is a God-ordained life that needs to be protected. And Preborn understands that. So Preborn's on the front lines. They're in those high concentrated abortion cities, undercutting Planned Parenthood, fighting against Planned Parenthood, doing an amazing job. That's why we love Preborn. So consider supporting them today. I hope that made some sense, folks. I appreciate your comments there in the chat. I didn't mean to veer us away there from the topics at hand, but it is a very important one, and it was on my mind as the GOP made that announcement yesterday. I think we're absolutely right to be frustrated with the spineless weasels in the Republican Party, and we should hold them to account. And folks, this is a reminder as well. Let me just say this before we move on. If your hope is in a political party, please put your hope elsewhere. The Republican Party is not going to save you. The Democrat Party is not going to save you. This is why our hope needs to be in Jesus Christ. And someday, by God's grace, and we're so excited for this, and we pray for this day where Jesus will establish his literal kingdom on this earth. In some sense, it's already established. Jesus is already reigning. But in another very real sense, we'll see that real political kingdom coming. That is where our hope has to be. Not in the GOP, not in the Democrats, not in one man, not in Joe Biden, not in Donald Trump, not in anybody else, but in the Lord Jesus Christ. I hope this can remind you of that. Okay, back to financial issues here for just a moment. I saw a headline that was very interesting. Seniors are dominating the U.S. economy. About 70% of wealth belongs to seniors, baby boomers, as well as some older Gen Xers. So Americans aged 55 and older control about 70% of U.S. household wealth, up from 50% in 1989. That's according to the Federal Reserve. Baby boomers' overall assets grew to a record $114 trillion by the end of last year. The 55 and up group accounts for 45% of personal spending in the U.S., according to some analytics here. The Wall Street Journal also reported that baby boomers are currently driving the U.S. economy, noting decades of growth in the values of their retirement savings, stock portfolios, homes that have been paid off. Baby boomers have been labeled the richest generation the U.S. has ever seen, the richest retiring generation. I know we have a lot of baby boomers listening here, and I feel very much like a fool as a 30-something-year-old talking to those of you who are in your 60s who have way more life experience than I do. But let me do my best here to tell you that I want you to consider thinking very hard about how you want the wealth you have built up to be handled. You are the wealthiest generation this country has ever seen, the baby boomers of the present day. This is a wonderful opportunity for you. Wonderful opportunity to consider how you'll leave a lasting legacy. Not only for your future generations, of course, but also for kingdom beneficiaries. And I would urge you, first and foremost, would be your church, and then ministries like Preborn as well. And if you would consider giving to financial issues, of course, we would not say no to that, but you need to give as the Lord leads you to give. Let's get to some comments here before we get to the end of the segment here. John from Alabama saying, Planned Parenthood, a machine used to fund the left, and that means the left on the Republican Party. Yeah, John, it is sad, man, but it really is true how intertwined Planned Parenthood and the left are. Claude saying, baby steps in prayer, this evil can be beaten, but only by the power of the Holy Spirit. Claude, you're right on there. That's exactly right, man. And I did not mean to say earlier as well that I'm not saying we shouldn't have baby steps. But I do think we have to keep our eyes on the prize. We cannot settle for abortion being made illegal after the second trimester, for instance. It needs to be made illegal from the moment of conception because it is murder. But I agree with you completely. It takes baby steps. Oftentimes that's what happens with politics too. And I also understand, folks, too, there are some people in power, some people in the GOP right now who are standing firm. There is a remnant. But I also see so many who are not. And so we need to hold their feet to the fire. Good comments there, folks. We'll try to get to some more of these as we come here. Hey, keep praying for Craig Halgard. Obviously, we were not able to have an ag today as well. He is recovering still. Keep him and his wife, Laura, in your prayers. We got more financial issues coming up right after this break. Stick with us.
If anybody's listening, thinking about joining, there's nothing like it. It's been great. I have peace of mind. I feel confident continuing to work. There's just a lot of things that y'all have added to my financial peace.
You guys are the man. So I encourage everybody, partner, get in there and watch the videos. Portfolio after portfolio, you hear the stories. It works. And you guys make it possible. And I thank you for that.
Married couples or even engaged as you're coming together, working on your finances. God has blessed us incredibly, and it's been incredible to see what He's done in our lives. Just want to thank you, Financial Issues.
As a novice investor, which I am, and I'm certainly learning so much from y'all. Thank you so much. Y'all take the fear out of it. And my portfolio is doing great.
You've really encouraged us, and I know you've probably encouraged so many others as well.
Become a partner today by simply going to financialissues.org/join. Click the green button to become a partner. That's financialissues.org/join.
Navigating through investment options can be challenging, especially when you're determined to uphold your God-given values. Every dollar you invest is a vote for the world that you want to live in. Let your values guide your investment decisions and help to shape the culture in which we live. Become a beacon of light and pave the way with biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, where faith and finance collide. Before investing, carefully consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the investment company. This and other important information can be found in the fund's prospectus. To obtain a copy, visit timothyplan.com or call 800-846-7526. Read each prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
The opinions and recommendations expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of the station or any of the program sponsors. Additionally, all products or services offered by the program sponsors may not be known by the program.
Welcome back, folks. Financial Issues. Great to be here with you this morning. Thanks for joining us for the program today. It's been a good one. We've been getting through a lot of things here. I did want to just share a couple more headlines with you, and then we'll get to some partner questions at the end there. And keep in mind, folks, remember what I said in the last segment. God is on the throne. Remember that as we read some of these headlines here, okay? Because some of them are pretty troubling. But God is good. He's on the throne. He's reigning, and the victory is His. And if we belong to Him, it is ours as well. A couple headlines here. First, we have a commission that found the COVID pandemic caused $18 trillion in economic damage to the U.S. $18 trillion. COVID-19 pandemic caused this much amount here. The figure took into account more than $8.6 trillion in financial losses resulting from deaths, more than $1.8 trillion in lost income, $7 trillion in mental health and chronic pandemic-related illness losses. Probably include in that as well a lot of the some of that mental health that a lot of people had when they were forced to stay inside, and when the government just completely cracked down on basically allowing us to have any freedoms at all, forcing people not to go to church and different things like that. We saw also long COVID, $435 billion in educational losses. And in terms of lost economic output, real gross domestic product fell 2.5% below the 2020 projections. Now, the commission did blame China for the massive human and economic toll of the pandemic, pandemic and argued, quote, understanding and acknowledging these costs should prompt the U.S. to lay the groundwork for holding accountable those whose negligence or overt actions exacerbated the pandemic's severity. I agree with that completely in regards to China. But I also think that a lot of this, we need to look in the mirror as well. We need to look at ourselves. A lot of the natural result of the pandemic lockdowns, sure, that was part of it, but a lot of it also was the ineptitude in dealing with it from the ruling class. I think that really was a huge part of this also. Another headline, California is considering millions of dollars in reparations costs after Governor Newsom declares budget emergency. The headline doesn't say that. I said Governor Newsom. After Governor Newsom declares a budget emergency. So $12 million in reparations despite Gavin Newsom's recent declaration of a state budget emergency. So the declaration allows the state government to use rainy day funds to mitigate the deficit. Proposed reparations legislation with finite costs would cost roughly $4.3 million per year at the low end. Folks, I don't even know what to say about this reparations thing here, but this seems to be par for the course with California, unfortunately. California is not exactly a shining example of fiscal responsibility, nor is it a shining example of moral responsibility as well. Last headline here, New York City, similar to California, New York City hotels are scoring big wins with taxpayer-funded migrant shelter deals. So New York City is reportedly planning to use $1 billion in taxpayer funding to house illegal immigrants. The city currently houses migrants in 193 shelters. That's 153 hotels and motels where more than 65,000 illegal immigrants currently reside. And the average cost for each room ranges from $156 to $300 per night. Folks, I hope that you can see kind of what's happening here is regardless of what happens in 2024, there's going to be a lot of cleanup that's going to be necessary. Now, I do think if Joe Biden wins the election in 2024, I think that cleanup would not happen. If Donald Trump wins the election, I do think there would be a lot of cleanup, but that cleanup is going to cost a lot of money. And to bring it back to financial issues, we are seeing a government that spends and spends and spends. And I personally am not so sure that I see an end either way until the United States government can figure out how to rein in some of this spending. It's going to be chaotic for sure. And I think we have to understand that, and we have to be ready to accept come what may with that. By the way, folks, this is part of why we offer the partnership strategy for you, is we believe one of the best protections against inflation is being able to have a good, solid portfolio of publicly traded stocks that are growing as well. So if you're interested in becoming a partner, today is a great day to do it for $132 a year. But especially as you consider what's happening around us, now's actually, I think, no better time than to become a partner with financial issues. So consider doing that today. And if you already are a partner, let me just say this as well. Thank you for your partnership. We could not do what we do without you and without all of our generous monthly soldiers as well. It's good stuff here. All right, Grant, let's get to a question. I know we got Carol Lee has a question here about the broad list. What do we got from Carol Lee?
Yeah, Carol Lee asks, I know I'm not to look at the broad list to buy a stock, but I just wanted to make sure y'all are not getting rid of the broad list, because sometimes I get on there just to see if there was not a sale on that particular stock that I have in my portfolio. Also, Dan used to always mention the yellow means foundational stock and never to sell. Is that still the case? Thank you, and God bless.
Good question, Carol Lee. Good to hear from you as well. Let's do your first question first. No plans of right now to slash the broad list right now. I know we've talked about that in the past. Dan used to talk about that. It's always something we're considering if, and I'm not putting this on you guys, but it is important to understand that if our partners and listeners, if the temptation becomes to fish from the broad list too much, and we find out that people are doing that a lot, it would actually be what we believe the best thing for you to get rid of the broad list. Again, we're not planning to do that, but I will say that the more our listeners, all of you, show good self-control and use the buy list for what it's meant for, and not use it to buy stocks off of, but to use the buy list to buy stocks and to use the broad list for what it's meant for, we won't need to worry about cutting it. As of right now, though, Carol Lee, there's no immediate change that I know of, so you don't need to worry about that. We're keeping it. It will look a little bit different on the new website, but you will still have access to all of that as well. And it's good to know what the purpose of the broad list is. you can kind of consider it almost as like a hold list. If you've bought a stock when it was on the buy list, moves to the broad list, doesn't mean it's a sell, means that you hold it until either we, God forbid, issue a sell alert. Hopefully we don't have to. If we do, then you sell it. Or if it goes back on the buy list, then it would be good for people placing new money to put new money in there once again. That's basically what happens. Secondly, I would also, tell you once again, this may look a little different on the website, the new website, as it does for now. But what I would do for you is, you can certainly use the buy list for the intention that you said, but you can also go to the website. You can scroll down to the commentary page, Carolee. Okay, so if you go to the commentary page, you'll see new to the buy list. You'll see recently removed from the buy list. And then you'll also see a section titled Sells Most Recent. Previous sells can be found here. There's a link there. If you click on that link here, that will take you to all of the sells that you have missed. I just checked it yesterday. There are sells going all the way back to 2017, 2016. You won't be able to search this page on the website in its current format, but we're hoping that you will be able to potentially on the new one as well. So it might be easier for you to use there. But that's one way that you can use it, Carolee. That's your first question. I hope that helps. Your second question with in regards to the foundational stocks, you are correct. Dan's color coding for foundational stocks is yellow, and ideally, you're exactly right. These would hopefully be stocks that you would never have to sell because they're good, solid companies. And also, in being a good, solid company, they're going to put shareholder interests and customer interest first, which means there's a good chance they'll remain biblically responsible, right? Because that's a core tenet of being biblically responsible, is not bowing down to the woke stuff, but just putting the needs of your customers and your investors first, as Tractor Supply did in the last couple of weeks. With that being said, Carolee, let me just say a few things for you, kind of some qualifiers here. So the quality of our foundational stocks, again, is that you would never have to sell those, but I hope all of you might start thinking about your entire portfolio that way. All of your positions. I would hope that you would think that this is a company that, God willing, assuming that they don't go wayward, and assuming that they are able to stay strong, that I would not have to get rid of this company for 10 or 12 years at least. So we're kind of hoping for you, Carolee, and for all of you out there to be able to see kind of your whole portfolio in this way. Now, that doesn't mean that the foundational stocks aren't still foundational, that they don't still kind of give you that firm foundation that you need, but we want you to be able to think of your whole portfolio that way. I hope that makes sense. Now, I have to say this clarifier as well, Carolee. In the world that we live in, any stock can sadly turn course. Unfortunately, any stock can become non-BRI, even those foundational stocks. So the rule with foundational stocks never to sell them obviously would get broken if that stock became non-biblically responsible, which we hope would not happen, and we would do everything in our power to make sure that that wouldn't happen. But it's a good reminder for you, Carolee, and for all of you. One of those foundations, as we often talk about, is, Dan used to say, never ever fall in love with one particular company. Never fall in love with one particular company. It's the same concept as not putting your hope into a political party. Don't put your hope in one particular company. Never fall in love in one particular company, because companies can go by the wayside. Companies can start to deteriorate. Companies can become non-biblically responsible. That happens. So you have to hold the companies with open hands, and I believe that includes the foundational stock. Hold it all with the open hands there, Carolee. I hope that makes sense for you, Carolee. You're doing a great job. It sounds like you've got the right mindset of it with looking at those foundational stocks there. And for all of you, I would just encourage you in that way as well. Look at all the positions that you have and consider, you know what? I hope that this is a company that I can hold for the long term, that I'm going to have this company in the next decade or the next decade after that, God willing. If you have that mindset, we believe you'll do a great job. Hope that was helpful for you, Carolee. I appreciate you all so much. Thanks for sticking with us there. God willing, we'll be back tomorrow. Hopefully, Shanna will be back with us live. Make sure to pray for her and for her protection. Until then, remember, all you have belongs to the Lord. It was a joy to be with you all this morning. Let's be found good and faithful stewards of the money that God has given us. Until next time, I'm Seth Udinsky, and God willing, we'll see you tomorrow for more financial issues. Have a great day.
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under.
Thank you for joining us. This has been an FISM production.